Download the iRadio Now app for iPhone or Android phones. Free at your iPhone App Store or Android App Market. Take AM 1470 WWNN with you wherever you go.
Talk 1470 WNN is now available on iHeartRadio. Download it now for free on your App Store. And take WNN with you wherever you go with iHeartRadio.
Talk health. Talk wealth. Talk politics. Talk 1470 WNN.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. The content of the following program, including all statements from the host and guests, is to provide general information and commentary about the law. Under no circumstances does any statement made by a host or guest to a caller or listener constitute legal advice or the formation of an attorney-client relationship, and the material from this program should not be viewed as a substitute for personal consultation with an attorney. Welcome to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese, who brings you all the latest news in the legal world. Jeff will be discussing a variety of legal topics with experts in the field. If you would like to ask a question or share a story on the air, please call toll-free 888-565-1470. Once again, that's 888-565-1470. Now, let's talk legal with Jeff Van Treese.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Talk Legal. I'm your host, Jeff Van Treese. I'm an attorney with the law firm Oltman, Flynn & Kubler, where we practice intellectual property law, including patents, trademarks, and copyrights. You can check us out online and view all episodes of this show on our website at oltmanpatent.com. That's oltmanpatent.com. I'd also like to acknowledge our other sponsor, Fresh Start Tax. Fresh Start Tax offers a full range of accounting services, including basic tax returns, as well as assistance with tax levies, wage garnishments, and any other tax-related concern. Tax season is going on right now, and we have the 15th of April coming up, so you can check them out and visit their website at freshstarttax.com. I have a special guest in studio this evening. Her name's Rabbi Jenny. She hosts a show on this station, and she's also an attorney in addition to being a rabbi, an addiction counselor, and author. So, Rabbi Jenny, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Jeff, for having me.
So I'd like to begin. Just tell us a little bit about your show.
Oh, the Rabbi Jenny Show is on 1470 AM, this station, on Wednesdays from 5 to 6. And it's about inspiring you, lighting a fire in you, and getting you excited about life again. We use Jewish mysticism and different spiritual principles and exciting guests to get you kind of just excited about being alive again, you know? And I just try to love you to death. That's that's what it's about.
Well, that's great. Tell me a little bit about your experience as an addiction counselor.
I have been working as a chaplain in spiritual care for chemical dependency for, I think I finished seminary about 4.5 years ago. So I fell into it after seminary. And I work from the spiritual aspect of addiction, looking at addiction as basically a soul loss or a spiritual wound, and working in conjunction with therapists that do traditional psychotherapy and helping the person build their self-esteem, confront grief issues, confront feelings of low self-worth that often come with addiction, and then igniting their sense of purpose and sense of self. So,
well, that's wonderful. I'd like to get your thoughts. As I mentioned at the top of the show, you are an attorney. We have a House bill coming up in the Florida legislature regarding sober houses or recovery residents that would essentially require the Department of Children and Families to create a voluntary certification program, essentially developing a roadmap for eventual oversight from the government. Right now, it's just there really is no oversight or certification or anything like that. So, to me, this looks like it's a step in the right direction. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's great. I really think it's great. Being in the field for this long, I believe that the sober living facilities will benefit from this. I don't think this will hurt them. I think this will help them. It will help their staff. It will help the patients because it will create a safer atmosphere. It will help regulate, different things like structure. I'm talking physical structure, that there'll be access for people with limitations. And so more people will have access to sober living facilities. I think it's well needed. We live in Palm Beach County, and I'm sure you know this about Palm Beach County. There's a high, it's one of the most populated addiction. They say it's the treatment capital of the country. There's the most treatment centers, the most sober living facilities. So it's kind of the one piece that's not regulated. And the facilities that I know of that do go for the DCF accreditation and do take that extra step have much better results with their patients.
One of the things about this bill is that it would require background screening of recovery residence employees. It would provide for potential denial or suspension of certification if the facility didn't meet the accreditation standards and so forth. So this would create sort of a uniform structure for certification for these facilities. There's a push right now amongst the National Association of Recovery Residences that most of the facilities are members of all over the country to eventually open up the Medicaid dollars to recovery residences. Right now, Medicaid can pay for detox. When somebody goes into the hospital or overdoses, they can go into a detox program. But then after that, there's no funding for anything. And if you look at the dollar amount that is paid towards these recovery residences and you look at the results, it compares very favorably to locking somebody up or having police go out and arrest people and so forth. What are your thoughts on that, if that is where this is eventually going?
Gosh. It's funny because this might be the answer to your question. It might not, because Jeff, you've asked me a lot of questions.
Well, give it a try.
Actually, I have a situation at work right now, and I'll keep names out of it, but I have a very, very wonderful patient. He is suffering with addiction, but he also has a high functioning autism spectrum disorder, and he is not appropriate in most of the sober living facilities because they're not regulated. And the staff were having issues with the idea of sending him off to a place that cannot handle him, and we cannot be ensured that the staff will be at a certain caliber and it will be a safe environment. So the money issue and whether or not they're wanting to access certain funds, I'm not really sure how I feel about this. This is a flooded industry. This is an industry that's very, very motivated by financial gain right now. It's highly competitive. There's a lot of people getting in the game. So you're going to have people who are going to do it for good motives, and I think you're going to have people who are going to come in and do it for monetary motives. Either way, I don't know. I do know that in my gut, I feel like regulating it and making sure people are taken care of properly. If they are going to simply live somewhere, that's different. But most of the sober living facilities, and maybe you know this and maybe you don't, most of them are connected to intensive outpatient or outpatient programs. And so they're actually not just sober living. It's a misnomer now. They are attending counseling. They are attending therapy. It's not just a place to live anymore. So maybe naming it or people figuring out that that's not really just what's going on. Because I think people are coming in the guise, well, people just want to live here. Why should we have to regulate where people live? They're not just living there. In fact, if you're getting Medicaid money, you have to be providing them with counseling. You have to be providing them with additional services, which says that they're a little bit higher needs than just somebody who needs an apartment.
Well, they're not receiving Medicaid yet. My understanding of the way the situation works is Medicaid can potentially fund the detox, which can last up to 30 days. And of course, addiction, as you know better than I, is a long-term disease process that can take many years of management and so forth. So, if it is a long-term disease, certainly insurance or government benefits would usually pay out over a much longer period than 30 days, but that's not the case here. That might be, one of the arguments for expanding Medicaid to cover these long-term recovery residence therapy.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I misunderstood the question, or I was busy thinking about all the other aspects of it. It's such an interesting issue. But yes, having Medicaid be able to fund, especially with so many public treatment facilities closing down because of the lack of funding, any access people could get for these issues would be positive.
mean, I read a study that was done to look at the cost-benefit analysis of treatment or ways to go about policy instruments for dealing with addiction, and the most cost-effective way was long-term therapy. The second best was local police and investigation of illicit drug activity. The third was on the national level, and then fourth, which was the least efficient, most costly, worst outcome, was international intervention, which it was the least effective for all sorts of reasons. It's almost impossible to police the entire globe. So, this being the most efficient way of dealing with addiction, we might see that the government could save costs on law enforcement.
Absolutely. Well, and they're constantly, it being in the business, they're constantly, the health insurance companies are constantly narrowing the window of treatment. When I started out, the average treatment stay was about 90 days. And that has moved to a 28-day model for, inpatient treatment. And then, you're literally counting the days when the patient's there based on how much the insurance company is going to award you as justified by the person's addiction. So if the government through Medicaid would be more capable of awarding longer time, of course I'm in support of that. And that goes with what I was saying with the sober living itself, not just being a place to live. I mean, it is a place that provides
It's not just
therapy.
a flop house.
It's not a flop house, but it's not even like an apartment. A lot of people, and maybe there should be maybe there should be a different name. You can be uncertified if you're not providing anything therapeutic and just a place to live that's a sober environment with people of like mind who'll try to keep it safe. But that is a big thing people are going to argue with. I think they're going to say, well, why should we have to regulate? This is just a place to live. And you and I both know that's just, it's not what they're doing.
Well, certainly that argument couldn't be made for nursing homes, which could be used as an analogy for an institutionalized care setting, which is what you're saying this is. It's not just a flop house. It's a place where people are. It's a residential treatment center. And certainly with Medicaid, which is heavily regulated, rightfully so, and at the same time, nursing homes receive Medicaid dollars for treatment, because you can't take people that can't care for themselves and say go live under a bridge somewhere. You have to provide treatment for people. And if you look here with people with addiction, it's a long-term disease. They really are in need of this treatment. The alternative of locking them up is infinitely more costly and is going to result in much more misery. Well, and they're going to be
accessing substances inside. I mean, they've shown that in the correction facilities that not only will they access substances, but they develop their own substances. And there doesn't necessarily limit their addiction. Their addictions can stay extremely active inside the correction system, unfortunately. But yeah, so
we did a show last year before the election on medical marijuana, which did not pass. It got a majority vote, but it didn't get the supermajority vote necessary for passing. We're going to have to go to break shortly. But I just, before we go to break, I was just wondering if I could get your thoughts on that, what you thought about Florida's efforts to legalize medical marijuana.
Oh, what are you doing to me? We were just having this conversation before. I have a very unique view about it. I have family members who benefited from medical marijuana. I have family members who I believe would still hopefully be able to benefit from marijuana and its benefits with pain, with chemotherapy, with glaucoma, with many different disorders that I don't know much about, not knowing the benefits to that degree. But my view is a little, unique. I kind of take it from a safety perspective. It's not necessarily that I don't believe in the medical benefits of marijuana. It's just I want to make sure it's safe.
Well, we're going to have to take a short break. We'll come back to that, and we'll be back with Rabbi Jenny. Please stay tuned.
This program is brought to you by the law firm of Altman, Flynn & Kugler. We practice elder law and intellectual property, including patents, trademarks, and copyrights. If you would like to patent your idea, please contact our Fort Lauderdale office for a free consultation. Call 954-563-4814. That's 954-563-4814. Or visit us online at altmanpatent.com. That's OLTMANPATENT.com. Spokesperson, not an attorney. This program is brought to you by Fresh Start Tax. Fresh Start Tax offers a full range of tax and accounting services, including tax return preparation and bookkeeping, as well as back taxes, wage garnishments, unfiled returns, or any other tax-related concern. Our dedicated team of tax attorneys, CPAs, and former IRS agents offer over 60 years of professional tax experience. For a free consultation, call 866-700-1040. That's 866-700-1040. You can also visit us on the web at freshstarttax.com. You're listening to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese, who brings you all the latest news in the legal world. If you would like to ask a question or share a story on the air, please call toll-free 888-565-1470. Once again, that's 888-565-1470. Now, back to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese.
And we're back. My guest this evening is Rabbi Jenny. She hosts a show on 1470 AM, this network. Before the break, we were discussing recovery residences and some upcoming legislative efforts. Before we continue our discussion, I'd like to give a shout out to our a show that's going to be starting this coming Monday with a guest that I had on here last week, Neil Kodsey, and his law partner, Gus Bravo. They're going to be starting their own legal talk show. It's called Attorney Confidential with Neil and Gus. I think it's going to be great. Tune in on Monday evenings, starting this upcoming Monday at 6 p.m. So definitely stay tuned for that. We're all excited and wish them the best as they launch their new program. I'd also like to let our viewers know that next week we're going to have a special edition of Talk Legal. My guest will be the renowned attorney, prosecutor that put Charles Manson behind bars, Vincent Bugliosi. He'll be discussing his book, The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. There was a DVD that was produced a few years ago, the slightly different title. It was called The Prosecution of an American President, but it was the same subject matter. Definitely endorse that DVD if you get a chance to watch it. So that'll be next week. We'll have Vince on the show. Very excited and look forward to it. So back to our discussion, Jenny. We were talking about medical marijuana and your thoughts on that. You said you come at it from a slightly different viewpoint. What are your thoughts on?
You know, my concerns are safety. I'm trying to figure out what the world would be like in Florida on I-95 if people were legally allowed to drive high. And I don't think that people would abuse their medical marijuana cards. And I'm not saying that, every, Tom, Dick, or Harry would apply for one. But my concern is that it's just as unsafe to drive stoned as it is to drive drunk. And there is no way to test for that. And I have issues with that. I have issues with how are we going to regulate abuse of marijuana? How are we going to keep the streets safe? And it's a strange thing because I do agree with it. Like we talked about, it's I don't know how they're going to do it, but that's always been the thing in the back of my mind. People argue that it's much safer to drive stoned than it is to drive drunk, and people may be right. I'm not arguing with that. All I know is that when I was in high school, wink, wink, and don't judge me, I'm a rabbi now and I'm a mom, but I, partook in a little marijuana, and you drive very crazy. You may drive slower than everyone else, but that doesn't usually work out in the HOV lane. It's just not the right place to do that. So I'm just curious about the safety of it.
Well, the thing about medical marijuana that I see as the greatest benefit is that it is much less addictive compared to a lot of the prescription painkillers out there.
Absolutely.
Compared to OxyContin or Soma or whatever else that people take for pain or chronic pain. And if people are taking those prescription painkillers and they get behind a wheel, it's probably going to be the same danger as somebody that's taking marijuana for medicinal purposes. And so, to me, I don't see it necessarily as more dangerous than existing painkillers, but it offers a huge benefit in that the potential for addiction is much, much less.
And you're absolutely right, and that's why my view on it. I almost don't know why I feel so strong about it. Sometimes you just, as a mom, there's just something about it that rings that it won't work. But because I do believe in it, I actually watched my ex-husband's aunt had very, very late stage cancer. And if medical marijuana wasn't, if unmedical marijuana wasn't available at the time, she wouldn't eat. I mean, I'm very aware of the benefits of this substance and what it has done for people all over the country. And I do think that, you know, it's a tricky thing. And I think comparing it to alcohol or comparing it to pills doesn't change the fact that in my gut, I worry about it. I worry about why people are going to open these clinics and what's going to happen. Is it going to be like the pain pills where you have to have a whole influx of funding to just close them down for abuse? Are you going to have lines and people being prescribed medical marijuana? And I mean, it's so big. It's such a big issue.
I mean, that is true. It certainly is. It wouldn't be flawless if we had medical marijuana. The only thing that I see as just a huge benefit is that, you know, as I'm sure you've seen as an addiction counselor, many instances of people that have never abused drugs in their lives, that have had they got in a car accident or something like that, and now they're taking painkillers for a relatively short amount of time, and then they become addicted.
Totally.
And if this could potentially be offered as an alternative to certain types of chronic pain that people may be in, where once their bodies have healed, they're certainly not as addicted as if they were on OxyContin or some painkiller that has a much higher potential for addiction. This could alleviate a great deal of misery or prevent it before it ever happens.
And it also, you know, I have to question that, because being a chronic pain sufferer myself, I've had such incredible benefit from acupuncture and herbs and different learning how to sit and going to amazing people who've taught me how to live in my life, having a chronic pain injury. I would question I would love to know the actual connection between medical marijuana and chronic pain, because I know that as an opioid it's not quite the same. It doesn't affect the same parts of the brain, but I would love to know, what will qualify you. It's a really big thing, and I think it's bigger in Florida than in some of the other states that have explored it, because we do have so many elderly. We do have a huge healthcare system, and we also have a huge addiction business here. So recovery from addiction, and also we've had issues with pain pill clinics in Florida. So it'll be, I think it's an issue that will be revisited, but I'm not sure. There's just this gut thing about the driving. I'm not sure. Maybe it comes from my own personal experience and just not being able to operate a vehicle at that point.
I mean, it's difficult because you have the costs and the benefits. You have the advantages and the disadvantages, and you have to weigh both. And it's sort of we're in the speculation phase about what would happen if medical marijuana became much more widespread. Personally, I think that the benefits would outweigh the disadvantages, but there's arguments to be made on both sides. I'd like to, since you're the first member of the clergy that I've had on this show, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the new bill that passed in Indiana that's been getting a lot of coverage. It's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which essentially would allow people or businesses to refuse to do business with others if they hold a sincere religious belief. This is something that is of much interest to the LGBT community. This relates back to the right of an individual or a business to not do business with someone for any reason or no reason. That used to be the law before Shelley v. Kramer, which we were discussing before the show. That involved restrictive covenants or deed restrictions for certain real estate property that would not allow African Americans to live in certain communities, and that was struck down by the Supreme Court, saying that the courts could not uphold those covenants under the Constitution. Similar arguments are being made here with this, and so I'm kind of curious, how far does someone's religious freedom extend when it comes to refusing to do business with someone based on their sexual orientation?
Gosh, Jeff, you're hitting me with so many heavy questions. It's been, 20 years since law school. But I'm actually enjoying my brain working in that way again. And I'm concerned, like we were talking about before. Where does this come from? My concern with this legislation is what is the purpose? You know, what is the motivation behind even, you know, writing this? These are the questions I have. I need to know more about the history. These kind of legislations, they open a sliding scale, and I do not believe that we ever, as a country, intended to mix religion with, you know, we separate church and state. And the practice of a business owner, gosh, you know, this is tricky for me, because I keep going back to the fact that it's, you know, that case that you're talking about when we're talking about a place to live. And if there's only one place to live in a town and the business owner doesn't want you to live there, but it's the only place within your economic means to live. And then they're not allowed, or they're supported in not letting you live there because they don't believe in your lifestyle. And I think it's important for our listeners to know that that's why these laws are invented, so people can make impossible situations impossible.
Well, one of the concerns or certainly one of the questions coming up is, how far does this law extend
Right.
to? So does it mean that a bank or a lending institution can't give a loan to a gay person? That's something that would be much more cause for concern. The example that was cited in the newspapers was saying that, let's say, a photographer working by himself that just has a sincere religious belief and doesn't want to do photography for a wedding with a gay couple, that person couldn't be forced to do so. That's very different from the prior situation with a lending institution, but the implications would be quite different. And so now the state is trying to clarify the meaning of the law, and then I guess we'll have a better idea of how far-reaching this law is.
Yeah, because that's insane. You know, those two situations are so far from each other. I mean, if you don't, you know, being a rabbi, I do, you know, Jewish weddings, I do interfaith weddings and all faith weddings. You know, those are the weddings I perform. But I wouldn't, you know, it's strange to equate my choices, you know, a photographer for the ability to get a mortgage. I mean, these are things this is why it concerns me. That I do not support it, because it reeks of far-reaching possibilities. And depending on the atmosphere in the state, the atmosphere in the place, you never know what is going to come next. You know, that's what I'm concerned about also, is where it's going to.
Oh, well, we have just about a minute left. I want to make sure you have a chance to tell our viewers how you can be reached, and tell us again when your show is on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Jeff, for having me on the show. The Rabbi Jenny Show is on Wednesdays from 5 to 6. You can also watch all past episodes on YouTube at The Rabbi Jenny Show. And you can reach me at rabbijenny.tv. And thank you so much, Jeff. It's been great.
I'd like to give another very special thanks to my guest, Rabbi Jenny. Please tune in next week for our special edition of Talk Legal, where my guest will be Vincent Bugliosi, and we'll be discussing his book, The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. That's next Tuesday night from 6 to 6:30. This is Jeff Van Treese for Talk Legal. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you for listening to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese. Tune in next week for more insightful and exciting information about the law. You can contact Jeff by email at jvt2law@gmail.com, or give him a call at 561-789-6866. That's 561-789-6866. The content of the preceding program, including all statements from the host and guests, is to provide general information and commentary about the law. Under no circumstances does any statement made by a host or guest to a caller or listener constitute legal advice or the formation of an attorney-client relationship, and the material of this program should not be viewed as a substitute for personal consultation with an attorney. The opinions expressed